Some time ago, I covered the origins and history of the ancient Bulgars on this channel. It got quite the attention, to say the least. But with that focus on the Danube Bulgars, who went on to form the first Bulgarian Empire in the Balkans, the story of another group of steppe warriors, who also emerged from the original Bulgars, was shoved to the side. Unjustly so. The Volga Bulgars. As you know, Bulgar history began to take shape with the creation of Old Great Bulgaria, led by the famous Kubrat Khan. After his death, the Bulgars, an Oghur Turkic-speaking people, split into three parts. The first group migrated westwards to the Balkans, under the leadership of Asparuh. The second smaller group stayed in what is now Ukraine and became a vassal of the Turkic Khazar Empire. But a third group, consisting of several thousand people, left the area completely by heading north. After wandering along the Volga, they eventually settled in the confluence of the Volga and Kama rivers and founded their own state, known as Volga Bulgaria. It was located in the modern Republic of Tatarstan in Russia. The Volga Bulgars' interactions with several major powers, including the Khazars, but also the Kievan Rus, and even ambassadors from the faraway Islamic caliphates, were characterized by a mixture of trade, diplomacy, and military conflict. From the 7th to the 13th centuries, they played a crucial role in the transfer of trade goods and culture from east to west, from south to north. The Volga Bulgars were also the first Turkic people ever to convert to Islam, although Tengrism and shamanistic beliefs remained present among the general population. In the 13th century, their state was completely overrun by the Mongol Empire. Nonetheless, their legacy survives to this day. As one of the most important but also most underrated entities along the Eurasian steppe belt, the Volga Bulgars certainly deserve our attention. We will now delve into their history by exploring their origins, the languages and ethnicities of their multicultural state, their economic achievements, and, finally, the role of Islam as their new state religion.
This documentary presents historical events based on extensive research and available evidence. While Khan's Den always strives for accuracy, interpretations of history may vary. Viewers are encouraged to engage in further study and draw their own conclusions.
The origins of the Volga Bulgars are tied to the movement and dispersal of several Turkic tribes during the early medieval period. Initially, the Bulgars were part of a broader group known as the Onogur, 10 tribes in Turkic, which included other Turkic groups such as the Utigurs and the Kutsigurs. The Akatsiri, thought to have belonged to the core group of the Huns, was also in close proximity. All of these Onogur were initially located in the Pontic-Caspian steppe region, closely interacting with other nomadic groups. After the arrival of the Gökturks, more Turkic tribes arrived in Europe, as well as the Magyars, who we talked about in a previous video. With the fall of the Gökturks in 630 AD and the rise of the Khazars shortly thereafter, the so-called Dulo group took over the Onogur for a short period of time and founded Old Great Bulgaria. After its defeat at the hands of the Khazars, the Dulo, the dynasty of the Bulgars, was forced to disperse. A segment of the Bulgar population moved northward and settled in the Middle Volga region. The exact timing of this migration is debated among scholars. Some place it in the mid-7th century, immediately following the Khazar victory, while others suggest it occurred in the mid-8th or early 9th century. The exact number of people within this group is also unclear. Upon their arrival, the Volga Bulgars established themselves in the region by forming a semi-nomadic society. As we have explained numerous times on Khan's Den, semi-nomadism is not the same kind of nomadic lifestyle that many viewers or listeners have in mind when it comes to such a topic. Semi-nomadism is a lifestyle and economic strategy where a group alternates between seasonal movements and settled periods. Semi-nomads have a fixed home base or settlement where they spend part of the year often engaging in agriculture or other sedentary activities. During other seasons, they move with their herds to find better pastures or hunting grounds and to escape the summer heat or winter cold respectively. In full nomadism, on the other hand, people continuously move from place to place without a settlement. Their entire economy and social structure are built around constant movement. Thankfully for the Volga Bulgars, the Volga region gave them the opportunity to settle down and rebuild their society from scratch. However, as they remained in the proximity of the Khazars, the Volga Bulgars were forced to pay tribute to the Khagan of the Khazars continuously. While the early history of the Volga Bulgars appears a bit shaky, it is feasible. And as it has become tradition on Khan's Den to analyze the respective sources in detail, we shall make use of such reports and chronicles going forward. The 7th century was a period of profound change in the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. As explained in the video about the Bulgars, Khan Kuprat split his Bulgar domain in modern-day Ukraine into 4 parts, bequeathing them to his 4 sons respectively. Around 660 AD, Khan Kotrak, one of these sons, led a part of the Bulgar tribes to the Middle Volga region. The part of the Bulgars who neither went with Asparuh nor with Kotrak and instead stayed with Batbayan, another son of Kuprat, agreed to live under Khazar control. For this reason, those who remained under the Khazar Khaganate are called Kara Bulgar, while the Volga Bulgars were also known as the Ak Bulgar. Ak and Kara mean white and black in Turkic respectively and often have political connotations. The white Bulgars were politically independent, while the black Bulgars were servant to another state. The Volga Bulgars most certainly did not call themselves Volga Bulgars because the Volga was called Idil, Idel or Edil among Turkic peoples. This name probably stems from the ancient Turkic word Ertil, from which the name of the river Irtesh may have been derived as well. This migration of Kotrak's white Bulgars occurred at a time when the Bulgarian Empire in the Pontic-Caspian steppe was disintegrating, while the also Turkic Khazars were expanding their power in the region. Simultaneously, the Byzantine Empire was weakened by Arab expansions in Anatolia, and the Slavs were beginning their spread eastward in Europe. Still, this turmoil did not hinder Kotrak in founding a new country. As a Khan, he established his rule over the local Finno-Ugric tribes and founded the Volga Bulgar Khaganate. In theory, he had taken on the same title that was reserved for whoever ruled over Ötüken in Mongolia, thousands of kilometers away. Then again, as you may have noticed, practically all political entities that were founded and ruled by a Turkic people at that time gave their rulers this Khaganal title. How could the Gökturks, being in Chinese captivity at that time, have prevented that anyway? Nevertheless, the political structure of the Volga Bulgar Khaganate was quite hierarchical, with the Khan or Khagan at the top, supported by a council of Bulgar nobles. The state was divided into several tributary principalities and had a complex hierarchy of officials and military leaders in each region. The capital was initially Bolgar, but was later moved to Biler. Both were located precisely along the Volga River for economic reasons. Just think of the advantages of founding a city near or on a river tile in the civilization games. The Volga Bulgar state included a few main tribes that administered the state and whose origins have left historians baffled for a long time. Yet, we can shed light on their compositions, geography and history by connecting a few known islets of information. The Barsil tribe was historically associated with the North Caucasian steppe zone, but it is most likely that they used to be part of the Tile or Törles Federation. The very tribal federation that once roamed the Khazar steppes was then integrated into Bumin Khagan's Göktürk army and eventually disbanded after the fall of the First Göktürk Empire. It was the Uyghurs, successors of the Gökturks in the 8th century, who recorded the tribe's name as Barsil. Chinese sources identified them with the Barshi. The Tibetans, also taking notice, called them Parsil. But according to Theophanes Simoketa, a Byzantine historian, the Barsis had already inhabited the Ponto-Caspian steppe when the Avars arrived in the 6th century, fleeing from the Gökturks, and gave them gold and fine gifts to appease them. The region of Dagestan, where the Avars passed through, was indeed known as Basilia, as they had seemingly left an impact there before migrating north. Taking this into account, we can deduce that the Balsils were one of the westernmost Turles tribes on the threshold from Central Asia to Europe. This further coincides with the book Ashkarhatsuts, which means Armenian geography, and was written by the Armenian polymath Anania Shirakatsi around the year 630, claiming that the Balsils would have rejected the Khazars while dwelling, quote, on an island, with that island probably being located on the riverbanks of the Volga. Much later, in the 10th century, Ahmad ibn Rusta finally recorded the Balsils to have been one of the main tribes in the lands of the Volga Bulgars. The Esagel formed the second group. They were also known as Ski in some texts and maintained a distinctive identity within the broader Bulgar state. You might have spotted them on the maps of previous episodes. Their origins can be traced back to the Western Göktürk Empire. According to the Chinese New Book of Tang, the Esagel used to be part of the Nushibi, a group of 5 tribes that ruled over one half of the empire. Gardisi, a Persian historian in the 11th century, noted the Esagel to have belonged to the Volga Bulgars by then. It is likely that they also used to belong to the Tile Turles Federation. Simoketa records that the Esagel sent an ambassador to the Byzantine Empire in 563. Ibn Fadlan, the Arab traveler to Volga Bulgaria, mentioned the Esagel as definitely being part of the main tribes in that state, but that they lived in a separate city called Ashla. Of that city, only ruins have remained. The Persian chronicler Gardisi noted in the 11th century, between possessions of Bulgars and possessions of Eskels, who also belong to Bulgars, is a Magyar area. These Magyars are also a Turk tribe. Perhaps you remember that in our video about the Magyars, we also mentioned Constantine VII of the Byzantine Empire denoting the Magyars regularly as Turks. Well, Constantine explained further that Esagel would have been part of the Magyars on their way to the Pannonian Basin. This, and a similarity in names, led to a few historians to believe that the Zekler were descended, at least in part, from the Esagel tribe. The third important group was the Suvar, a mix of the Turkic Sabirs and other local tribes such as the Mari, who were speakers of an Uralic language. The Suvar's tribal chief was called Bek, stemming from the ancient Turkic definition of chiefs along the steppe belt. The Suvar, it seems, used to be independent from the Volga Bulgars before being absorbed in 975. They kept some form of political autonomy, and their members mostly stayed in the eponymous city of Suar on the right bank of the Volga, precisely located in the Spassky district of Tatarstan. There are tales and legends among the Turkic Chuvash about them. One cannot help but see another similarity, not just a name, and it seems likely that both are related. Ibn Fadlan, of course, also had a record on the Suvar stating the following.
The king moved from a reservoir called Halaja to a river called Javashir, where he stayed for 2 months. Then he again wanted to move and sent a Slanik to a tribe called Suvar, inviting them to perform with him. They refused to submit and split into 2 groups. One of these groups was headed by his son-in-law, whose name was Virak. He was their ruler. The king of Bulgaria sent them a message saying, "Indeed, Allah the Great and Mighty has sent down to me the grace of Islam and the supremacy of the ruler of believers. I am his slave. These people recognized my authority, and if someone contradicts me, I will meet him with a sword." Another group was headed by the king of the tribe called Eskel. He recognized the supremacy of the king of the Bulgars, but by that time had not yet converted to Islam.
Another interesting tribe that was mentioned in the books of Ibn Rusta and Al-Masudi was that of the Bultas. According to their observations, the Bultas tribe was a direct vassal of the Khazar Khaganate and used to dwell on the eastern border of the Khazar state. Remember from our last story about the Pechenek that their attack on the Bultas led to the Khazar counterattack against the former. But this implies a conflict between the Pechenek and the Volga Bulgars, or at least a part of the Volga Bulgars. Later records imply that the Burtas converted to Judaism in the 13th century, with the Burtas and the Blutachi, a Jewish people appearing just in that very area, speculated to be one and the same people. It is presumed that the Burtas were further ancestors of the Mokshas, a Finno-Ugric people who took on the Turkic language by way of the Khazars and Volga Bulgars' influence, and later ruled over the Temnikov Principality of the 14th century. Ibn Fadlan, en route to Scandinavia, also mentions the Baranja, a group connected with the Balanja of Khazaria, to have lived in the Volga Bulgars' periphery. This group numbered around 5,000 members. Unfortunately, there are no reliable reports about the number of inhabitants for the other aforementioned groups. Whatever the case with the individual tribal names, all sources agree on one thing. These main groups often had internal conflicts against each other, but also united against external threats. The Volga Bulgar state certainly sounds like a typical Turkic state in that regard. Nonetheless, the segmentary nature of their polity is noted in several historical accounts. We can therefore finally deduce that the state of the Volga Bulgars was not an empire with a strict monarchy or necessarily dynastic lineage like the state of the Khazars, Karakhanids or the First Bulgarian Empire, but a confederation of several tribes, most likely led by the Barzel and Esegal, with the Sabirs, Burtas and other tribes like the Bilars and Baranjas. The Baranjas, on a final note, were also noted to have been present in the Caucasus since the 370s, implying that they arrived in Europe alongside the Huns, long before any of the other groups. The culture and religion of the Volga Bulgars underwent significant transformations throughout their history, reflecting their complex interactions with neighboring peoples and the profound impact of their conversion to Islam. In their early years, the Volga Bulgars practiced a traditional Turkic religion centered around the worship of Tengri, the prime deity of the eponymous belief system commonly known as Tengrism. Elements of shamanism were deeply ingrained in their culture, a reflection of their nomadic roots. As the Volga Bulgars settled into their new homeland, they began to encounter new religious influences. Christianity started to penetrate their society, likely through their Slavic subjects. However, it was Islam that would ultimately capture the hearts and minds of the Bulgar rulers. The pivotal moment came in 922 AD when Khan Almush, the son of Shilki, officially converted to Islam, taking the name Jafar bin Abdallah. This conversion was more than a personal spiritual journey. It was a calculated political move that would reshape the destiny of the Volga Bulgars. By embracing Islam, Almush distanced his people from Khazar Jewish control and opened the door to potential aid from the powerful Islamic Abbasid Caliphate. The significance of this conversion is underscored by the famous mission of Ibn Fadlan in 921 and 922. His detailed account of his journey to the Volga Bulgars illustrates the Caliphate's interest in strengthening ties with this strategic northern realm. Ibn Fadlan had been sent to Volga Bulgaria by the Caliph Al-Muqtada. Logically, Ibn Fadlan paid particular attention to the region's religious landscape. The Bulgar ruler Almush had extended an invitation for Islamic guidance, a move that was as much political as it was spiritual. By aligning himself with the powerful Abbasid Caliphate, he sought to secure both financial assistance and military protection for his realm. In his role as a religious scholar, or faqih, Ibn Fadlan took on the responsibility of ensuring the proper implementation of Islamic practices among the Volga Bulgars. But his experiences revealed a religious landscape that was far from the idealized version of Islam he had expected to find or help establish. One particular incident stands out in Ibn Fadlan's account. He describes witnessing the Bulgar Khan making what he considered a grave error during prayer, repeating a certain exhortation twice instead of the prescribed single recitation. This seemingly minor misstep provoked a strong reaction from Ibn Fadlan, who viewed it as evidence of a deeper problem, the practice of an imperfect, doctrinally unsound version of Islam. The anecdote may seem insignificant to the reader, yet it illustrates Ibn Fadlan's broader approach to evaluating the societies he encountered during his travels. His judgments were heavily influenced by the degree to which these communities had embraced Islam and their dedication to implementing Islamic principles in their daily lives. We saw this with Ibn Fadlan's narration of the Ozturks, whose lifestyle, particularly that of the Turkish women, he criticized and ridiculed. For Ibn Fadlan, the proper practice of Islam was not just a matter of personal faith, but a crucial element in the development of a civilized society. Consequently, his assessments of many Central Eurasian peoples were often harsh. He saw their religious practices as deeply flawed. In his view, these societies lacked a true connection to the divine and failed to apply reason in their religious observances. Despite Ibn Fadlan's critique, the Islamization of the Volga Bulgars ushered in a new period of cultural flourishing. Education and architecture saw significant development as Islamic learning and aesthetics took root in Bulgar society. Slowly, mosques and Quranic schools sprang up in some settlements, and the sounds of muezzins calling the faithful to prayer also became part of daily life. As Islam gradually replaced earlier Turkic practices, it became deeply integrated into the fabric of society. Almush, by the way, is said to have had two sons called Mikhail and Hassan, though that information stems from the Jafar Tarikhi, supposedly a historical chronology on the history of the Volga Tatars, which was partly translated into Russian in the 17th century. It remains controversial. And speaking of controversial, the name Almush seems very similar to the name Almos, the first sacred king of the Hungarians in the 9th century during their time at Etelkürs and before migrating to Pannonia. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Who knows? Yet, the story of Volga Bulgar culture is not solely one of Islamic influence. As I implied before, their society was a melting pot of cultural interactions, blending elements from Turkic heritage with influences from Slavic and Finno-Ugric neighbors. The Bulgars spread their culture and language to surrounding Finno-Ugric peoples, while also partially integrating and assimilating local elements into their own identity. This cultural synthesis is perhaps best exemplified in the evolution of their language. The linguistic roots laid down during this period would eventually give rise to the modern Volga Tatar language. And despite their shift towards urban living, the Volga Bulgars maintained elements of their nomadic military tradition, particularly their strong cavalry. These military capabilities, combined with their defensive structures, allowed them to navigate the complex political landscape of the region, facing threats from the rising Kievan Rus in the west and the Pechenegs and Cumans in the south. However, all great things must come to an end, and the Volga Bulgars' end came with the arrival of the Mongols. Volga Bulgaria was a pivotal link in the east-west and north-south trade routes, especially significant to the Islamic world. It served as one of the principal sources for Islamic regions, primarily through the Volga-Caspian route controlled by the Jewish Turkic Khazars. According to Al-Muqaddasi from Khorasan, there were imports of various furs such as sable, squirrels, ermine, marten, fox, beaver and rabbit pelts of all colors. Additionally, goods like goat hides, wax, arrows, poplar timber, bats, fish glue and fish teeth, yellow amber and so on were also transported, as well as slaves, sheep and cattle. All these commodities came from the Volga Bulgars via Khorasan. The ruler's tent, by the way, as described by Ibn Fadlan, was large enough to hold 1,000 people inside and was covered with carpets from Armenia. Most certainly, the Volga Bulgar elite was a wealthy one. Then again, the economy also contained a significant stock breeding component. Despite the impressive urban growth, older nomadic social traditions persisted, such as inheritance practices from brother to brother and paying taxes to the ruler in the form of horses. But the Volga Bulgars also dominated access to the Finno-Ugric peoples, who were the primary source of furs, which had been a long-standing interest since the Ugric ancestors of the Volga Bulgars. This extensive international trade was a key factor in the sedentarization of the population in the Middle Volga region. The semi-nomadic lifestyle saw them spending winters in wooden houses in cities and towns, and spring and summer in yurts. This is akin to the tradition of virtually all Turkic peoples across the Eurasian steppe belt who were only semi-nomadic as they exchanged their places of living in accordance with the seasons. The capital city, simply called Bulgar, modern-day Bolgari in the Kupysev region of the Republic of Tatarstan in Russia, and another significant city, Suvar, were two major trade hubs. These cities played a crucial role in the trade network, facilitating the exchange of goods and fostering economic activities. Other important cities included Kazan on the Kama River, with the Rus having intimate knowledge of these regions, also mentioning places like Yukatau and Yelabuga. Relations with the Rus were certainly not peaceful, often marked by conflicts over trading issues. These conflicts sometimes led to campaigns for revenge or local advantage rather than wars of conquest. The Bulgars even tried to convert the Rus ruler Vladimir I to Islam to prevent further raids, but this only led to a trade agreement in 1006. The Rus-Oghuz alliance, which attacked Bulgar lands and had destroyed the Khazar capital, exemplifies such hostilities. We mentioned the Rus-Oghuz destruction of the Khazars in last year's video about the Khazar Khaganate. Go check it out by clicking on the little icon in the upper right corner right now. If we take a look at the map in the 10th century, we need to consider two more states or state-like entities in the neighboring region of the Volga Bulgars. First, the Pechenik. As mentioned earlier, they came into conflict with the Khazar Empire as they raided the territories of the Burtas, then a group under Khazar dominion. As large parts of the Burtas moved northwards and became part of the Volga-Bulgar Khaganate, it is likely that the Pechenik, on their way out of the Ponto-Caspian steppe, also warred with them. Secondly, the Kumans. This is the European term for a people that are historically known as Kipchaks. These Turkic people emerged in the Eastern European steppes by 1055, as noted in the Rus chronicles. Their initial appearance was likely a reconnaissance mission, followed by a raid in 1061. The Kipchaks formed a multi-layered ethno-linguistic confederation, Turkic at its core and its top. Their formation was influenced by the decline of the Kitai-Liao state in East Asia and the rise of the Manchu-speaking Jurchen state in the 1120s, which pushed them and other steppe peoples westward. The Kipchak confederation stretched from the Danubian frontier to western Siberia and Central Asia, forming three major groups: the Western Kipchak, known to Europeans as Kuman, the Central Asian Kipchak Kangli, containing elements of the Pechenik, and the Kipchaks in Western Siberia. The Kuman Kipchaks once assisted Byzantine Emperor Alexius I in defeating the Pecheniks at Levunion in 1091, as we saw in the last video, but refused to participate in the subsequent massacre. They also interacted significantly with the Horasanshahs, the Seljuks, and later other Turkish Central Asian states. The Kipchaks frequently engaged in conflicts with the Rus and other regional powers, participating in both raids and military alliances. Just like the Volga Bulgars, the Kipchaks were also participating in the Eurasian steppe trade. Their impact on the Volga Bulgars is somewhat challenging to determine, but it is evident that both groups were part of the larger socio-political dynamics of the region. The influence of Kipchak elements was especially significant during the period of the Golden Horde. This led to the Kipchakization of the Volga Bulgars, if I may say so, and is evidenced by the language shift from Oghuric Turkic to Kipchak Turkic among sizable elements of the Volga Bulgar population. But as we draw our journey through the history of the Volga Bulgars to a close, we must turn our attention to the turbulent events that marked the twilight of their state. The fate of this former steppe civilization was tied to the sweeping tide of Mongol conquest that engulfed much of Eurasia in the 13th century. Starting in the Orkhon Valley in modern-day Mongolia, in the same area from which the Xiongnu, Roran, Gökturks, and Uyghurs used to rule, the Mongol military campaigns spanned to Korea, China, the Tarim Basin, and Central Asia during the reign of Genghis Khan. The western expansion was led by successors including Batu Khan, grandson of Genghis. Yet, when the Mongol horde reached Volga Bulgaria in 1223, the during the lifetime of Genghis Khan, it did not simply steamroll through. Instead, it was halted when it first encountered a large Bulgar army near Kanik in Tatarstan. In the wake of their Dnieper campaign, the Mongol forces, led by Subutai and Jebe, received unexpected orders from Genghis Khan. They were to return to the Volga River, locate Jochi, and escort him back to Mongolia. This directive, delivered by a messenger, marked a shift in the Mongols' immediate objectives. Jochi was known for his military prowess but also for his headstrong nature. He joined the returning force with an army of 10,000 men. Their rendezvous on the Volga's west bank set the stage for what would become an exploratory campaign along the northwestern fringes of the expanding Mongol Empire. The combined Mongol army, now bolstered by Jochi's troops, first turned their attention to the Bulgars residing on the Volga's western bank. After subduing this group, they pushed northward, their movement serving a dual purpose of military action and reconnaissance. The events that transpired near the Samara bend of the Volga River have been a subject of debate among historians. The primary source for this episode is a brief account by the Muslim historian Ibn al-Athir. He suggests a significant Mongol setback. Accordingly, the Bulgars, having caught wind of the Mongol advance, prepared a series of ambushes. They lured the Mongol forces into a trap, encircling them and inflicting heavy casualties. This version paints a picture of a rare defeat for the otherwise dominant Mongol army. The alternative account is far less dramatic. It simply states that a Mongol force of about 4,000 men traveled through Volga Bulgaria on their return journey to Mongolia. This version makes no mention of any engagement with the Bulgars, let alone a defeat. Regardless of what truly transpired at the Samara bend in Kanik, the Mongol force continued its campaign. The Mongols skirted the Ural Mountains. Moving southward, they then engaged and defeated the eastern Kumans, Kipchaks, and the Kangli Pechenik, killing their leaders and imposing hefty tributes. We know for sure that the relentless Mongols under Subutai returned and this time decisively defeated the Volga Bulgars in 1246. This assault was devastating for sure. Bilar and Bolgar, by now the two main capitals of the Volga Bulgars and their respective tribes, were reduced to ashes. But the destruction was not merely physical. It represented the dismantling of centuries of cultural and economic development. The Volga Bulgar Empire, once created by a Turkic steppe people, met the same fate as virtually all other states created by Turkic nomads in Central Asia at that time. The fact that it was a majority Turkic army under Mongol dominion that carried out the operations only adds to the irony of the situation. Despite their courageous efforts, the Volga Bulgars could not withstand the Mongol war machine. Between 1236 and 1240, their resistance had been crushed, and their lands were incorporated into the Mongol Ulus, the Mongol nation. Later, this area became part of the Golden Horde nation, the northwestern successor state of the empire. Originally led by Mongolic-speaking Tatars from East Asia, the Golden Horde state would very soon be Turkified from bottom to top, with the Tatars thereby joining the Turkic world. The once proud Bulgar state, though, was now a mere province in a much larger imperial system. In time, as the Golden Horde itself fragmented and new polities emerged in the region, the Khanate of Kazan was established in the 15th century, a successor state that carried forward many elements of Volga Bulgar culture and identity. Even after Kazan fell to the expanding Russian state in 1552, echoes of the Volga Bulgar legacy continued to resonate. Today, the descendants of the Volga Bulgars, primarily the Bulgar Tatars, keep alive the memory of their ancestors. Archaeological sites like Bolgar, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, stand as silent witnesses to the grandeur of the Turkic civilization with Finno-Ugric and Slavic elements that once flourished along the banks of the Volga River.